Hello and welcome to the channel. On today's tutorial, I'm going to be sharing with you a requested video from a subscriber on how to draft a deep plunging neckline inbuilt corset with an inverted basque. So if it's your first time viewing my channel, please hit on the subscribe button. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up. Let's dive right into today's video. So first, here is my pattern, and I've marked my shoulder to bust, shoulder to under bust, shoulder to waistline, and my top length, which is 22 inches. So you can go ahead and use 24 inches or more depending on your height. So I'll go ahead and mark my basic neckline, which is 3 by 3 inches, and I'm going to go ahead to place my French curve. And after that, the next step I'm going to take is just to go ahead to outline it. And after outlining this pattern, I'm going to mark out my shoulder. So the shoulder I'm using is 7 inches plus half, because I'm attaching sleeve, which is 7. So I'll go ahead to outline my shoulder. So I was supposed to use the person's measurement, but I don't have it, so I'll be using my own measurement. So what you have to do is just to pay attention and repeat the same process for yours, and you're going to get the exact results. So now I'm going to mark my chest line, which is your bust circumference divided by 6 plus 1.5 inches. Mine is 7 inches, and I'm going to divide what I have there into 2, go in by half, and I'm going to mark my bust circumference divided by 4, which is 33 divided by 4. I have 8.3, and I'll go ahead to connect my armhole, and I'm going to outline it. So this is what I have, and the next step is to mark my nipple to nipple. So also go ahead to mark your nipple to nipple, and the nipple to nipple I'm working with is 7 inches divided by 2. I have 3.5. I'm going to go ahead to mark it at the chest line, at the bust line, under bust, waistline, and down to my top length. So after I'm done marking it, I'm going to go ahead to connect it all the way down to the top length. So now I'm going to divide what I have at the shoulder into 2, and I'm going to connect it, get the midpoint, and I'm going to connect it down to my chest line this way. So now after I'm done doing that, I'm going to be taking my dart intake of 1 inch at the under bust and at the waistline. So after I'm done marking that, I'm going to go ahead to connect it. So for the lower part of your pattern, we are going to be making use of a diamond dart, and we are going to connect it to the hip later. So go ahead to connect from your under bust to your waistline, and then from your waistline down to your top length, which will be your hip measurement. Will be inserting our hip circumference at that point. So after that, I'm going to go ahead to outline it so that it will be more visible for you to see. So after I'm done doing this, I'm going to go ahead and mark 1.5 inches upwards. So you can go ahead and mark also 2 inches in case you don't want to review your cleavage, and I'll be marking my dart intake of 1 inch at both sides. So for a plus size, you can also go ahead to use 1.5 inches and connect it down to your bust line. So I'm going to use my marker also and outline it at this point. So now I'm going to place my French curve and connect. So if you don't have a French curve, it is not a problem. It's not compulsory that you're going to use a French curve. You can as well use a freehand sketch, which is also okay. So now we'll start moving over to the yoke, and before you draw out your yoke, you make sure that this part is matching. If not, by the time you join your cup, you might be having little issues, or one part will be longer than the other part. So I'll go ahead and trace out the neckline that I want. I'll be using a freehand sketch to do this. So you can also make use of your French curve if you're good at that. I'll come down by 1 inch from my waistline, because the deep plunging neckline came down by the waistline, like it came down after the waistline. So after doing this, I'm going to go ahead and I will outline this pattern. So after I'm done outlining it, I'm going to place my French curve and connect this other side. Now to draw my cup on this part, I'm going to place my tape, and I'm going to mark my bust circumference divided by 4, which is 33 divided by 4. I have 8.3, and I will go ahead to mark at that point. So what I have from this armhole to that point, I'll divide it by 2, and I'm going to connect my cup. So you can go down by half at the armhole if you want. So I'll go ahead to connect my cup this way, and this is what I have. So now the next step is to label my cup so that I'm not going to misplace it. After I'm done doing this, I'll go ahead to insert my body circumference. At the chest line, I'll mark my bust circumference divided by 4, measure this that intake, which is 2 inches, replace it, and mark my sewing allowance on that point. So whatever you have at the chest line, you're going to place it at your bust line. At your underbust, mark your underbust circumference divided by 4, measure the dart intake, and mark your sewing allowance. At the waistline, mark your waist circumference divided by 4, measure the dart intake, replace it, and mark your sewing allowance. So now on the lower part, you're going to mark your hip circumference divided by 4 and mark your sewing allowance. You can go ahead to add ½ inch in case of shortage while cutting out. So I'll go ahead and connect my pattern, and after I'm done connecting my pattern, I'm going to use my marker and I'm going to outline it so that it's going to be very visible. So this is what I have on this point, at this point, sorry. So now we are going to go ahead to alter the waistline of this particular corset, and I'm going to be also inserting a bust dart. So I went up by 2 inches from that point, and I'm going to connect. So for this pattern, we are going to be using a bust dart, and for my bust dart, I'll be making use of 1.5. so this varies from different people, and on my pattern I didn't use much dart because you're going to be creating a slanted boning channel on your pattern. So I'll go ahead and mark 1.5 inches for my bust dart. You can use 2 inches, 2.5, depending on the difference you have from your front and your back measurements. So I'll go ahead to mark it out so that it's going to be more visible for you to see. So after I'm done doing this, the next step is to go ahead to cut out my pattern. Before I do that, I'm going to go ahead to pin my pattern. So if you have any question regarding this tutorial, please leave your question at the comment section, and if you haven't yet subscribed, please hit on the subscribe button. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up. So after cutting at this point, you're going to go ahead to slit your bust dart this way, and you're going to merge it up. So and you're going to go ahead to cut out your cup. So I'll be introducing my gum, and I'll be using it to hold my dart, the bust dart that I took out from the bust point this way. So you can use a sellotape to do that. I don't have a sellotape at this point, so I'm just be using my cup. And also for the side, I'm just going to go ahead to replace it and cover up the darts that I mark, which is the bust that I marked at this point. So to make sure I'm accurate, I'm going to use my cup to check that. So this is what I have after I'm done cutting, and I'm going to go ahead to cut out the remaining part of my pattern. So when I was actually cutting my pattern, my camera went off, so I couldn't show some parts when I was cutting out. But after cutting out, this is what I have. And now we'll be moving over to the back, and I've gone ahead to mark out all the basic measurements just like we did in the front pattern. So the only difference is that the top length for my back pattern is 20.5 inches. So remember, our front length is 22 inches minus the bust dart of 1.5 inches. I have 20.5 inches. So now I'll go ahead and mark my nipple to nipple divided by 2, and I'm going to go ahead to draw a straight line, and I'm going to connect. So also extend that line down to your top length. So after you're done doing that, the next step you're going to take is to mark your dart intake, and I'll mark ½ inch at both sides of my waistline. So for this pattern, I'm going to make it basic for the back. To mark your dart, make sure you place your tape and mark your shoulder to bust plus 1 inch. That is where your dart is going to stop. Then connect that from that 1/2 inch upwards to that point, and then slant down to your top length, which is going to serve as your hip point. So after you're done doing this, you go ahead to outline your pattern so that it's going to be very visible for you to see, and I'll go ahead to do mine also. So I'm going to outline my chest line. That is where the yoke for the back is going to start. So from here now, I'm going to go ahead and come down by 1 inch, and I'll connect to this point. So this is not a standard. You can decide to make another yoke design for your back. So after I'm done doing this now, the next step is to go ahead to insert my body measurement. I'll mark my bust circumference divided by 4 because I'm not using any dart. Rather, I don't have any dart intake there, so I'll just mark my bust circumference and the sewing allowance. At the under bust, I'll mark the under bust circumference divided by 4. So for this pattern, you can go ahead and not use an under bust measurement for this point, but I like using my under bust measurement so that my pattern will be fitted at that part. So at the waistline, mark your waist circumference divided by 4, measure the dart intake and add your sewing allowance. So at the top length, go ahead and mark the hip point and your hip circumference and mark your sewing allowance. So go ahead and connect. So after you're done connecting, the next step you're going to take is to go ahead to outline. I'm going to go ahead and outline my pattern. So after I'm done outlining the pattern, we'll be working at the upper part of the yoke. So at this part, you want to get rid of any bulginess or anything that will make your yoke to be too long. So I'll mark 0.25 inches at that point. Now I'll be coming in by 2 inches at this point, and I'll come in by 1 inch. So this is not a standard. I'm just doing this to create like a little design at the back when I am lacing up my back. So I'm going to go ahead and make dots to indicate my lacing bar. So after I'm done doing this, so remember on our pattern, at the front part we went up by 2 inches. So we are going to repeat that same process at the back. So the length of the front is 22 inches. After inserting your bust dart, it's 20.5, and the length of the back is also 20.5 because we are not making use of a bust dart at the back. So now I'm going to take that length I marked at the waistline. I'm going to take it all down to the lacing bar. So the reason why I'm doing this is that for your inbuilt corset, the back length and the front length is not the same. It's not usually the same. So after that, I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to cut out this pattern. So if you have any question regarding this part also, please leave at the comment section. And if you haven't yet subscribed also, please hit on the subscribe button and don't forget to give this video a thumbs up. So now we are going to head over to the skirt pattern of this pattern now. So here I have this pattern paper and I'm going to be marking the skirt length, which I have. I'm going to make use of the full length of this pattern paper, which is 24.5. So I'll go ahead and be using 22 inches as my skirt length, and I'll use 20, then add 2 inches to it. It will now be 24.5. That's 22.5 plus 2 inches, 24.5. I'll place my tape and I'm going to mark my waist to hip point, which is 7 inches. Go ahead and use 8 inches if you're very much tall, and I'm going to mark this as my hip and this as my waistline. So now I'm going to mark my waist circumference. So if you snatched your waist, you're going to use the measurement you snatched. So now I didn't snatch my waist, and I'm going to be using my waist circumference divided by 4 plus my sewing allowance. At the hip point, I'll mark my hip circumference divided by 4 plus my sewing allowance. So now the next step is to get your waist to knee point. So from your waist to knee point, my waist to knee point is at 19 inches. So I'm going to go ahead to mark at that point. So the reason why you're marking that at that point is that you want to create like a fitted effect on this pattern. So you can go ahead and go up by 2 inches if you want it to have a more fitted effect, starting immediately after your butt line. So I'm just going to leave it at this point. So I'm going to connect from my waist to my hip. So now what I have at my hip is, my hip divided by 4 is 10. That's 40 divided by 4. I have 10 plus 1.5 sewing allowance, 11.5. So if you want to have a fitted effect at the lower part, what you're going to do is to minus 1.5 inches from what you have at your hip measurement, or 2.5 inches. So I'll go ahead and minus 1.5 inches, and I'll go ahead to connect it downwards. So if you want it to be more fitted, go ahead and minus 2 inches from that. So after this point, I'm going to go ahead to cut out my skirt pattern. So after I'm done cutting my skirt, for this, if you want to get your back pattern, you're going to go ahead and place your pattern and add your sewing allowance, your zipper allowance to the back. So now I'm going to open up this pattern. It's actually on fold. So you're going to go ahead and mark the middle point of your skirt. This is very important because you're going to be creating like that inverted basque from that point. So now remember, from what we have at the thumbnail, the inverted basque started a bit lower from the navel. So I'll mark 1 inch at the center, and at this point I marked 3.5 inches. But when I was drawing it out, I went down about 5 inches or 5.5 inches. So it just depends on what you want to create at this point. So I'm just going to go ahead and trace it out with my pencil first. After I'm done tracing it out with my pencil, I'm going to use my marker to outline it to make it more visible, and then I'm going to be cutting out this pattern. So with this, we have come to the end of today's tutorial. If you find this very interesting and educative, please hit on the subscribe button, and don't forget to give this video a thumbs up. And see you in our next video. Thanks.